I'm James Dart, co-founder of Inspire You and Yes, I Will Vote, and welcome to the first episode of Remoaner Telling Our Story podcast series. On today's episode, I have my brother Jack Dart with me, co-founder of Yes, I Will Vote and Inspire You, as well as my parents, mum and dad, who will give some comic relief, hopefully, as well as a generational opinion on what we're discussing. So without further ado, here is the first episode. I hope you enjoy. This first episode of Remoaner Telling Our Story series podcast, I have my brother Jack Dart with us. Hi, Jack.
Hi.
And I've also invited our mum and dad on this first episode as well, who are going to just give us, some entertainment, hopefully, but a generational opinion, slightly different from Jack and I, hopefully, as well. So hello, mum and dad.
Hi.
Hello, boys.
Okay, so let's just jump straight in. Jack, I want to talk to you a bit about yourself, your story, your campaigning. We'll talk about, obviously, our joint campaigning, Inspire You, Yes, I'll Vote, all that sort of stuff. And we'll get mum and dad involved as well, talking about some of the aspects of Brexit and the development of the campaigning from the referendum in 2016 through to the 2019 general election. That's going to be what we're going to discuss this evening. So, Jack, firstly, I want to take you back to 2016, not the vote, but before the vote. I seem to remember you and I were sort of getting into politics a little bit, but I wouldn't have called myself pro-EU at that stage. And I think I made my mind up about which way I was going to vote quite late on in the day. Would it be fair to say that you were at that stage small p political as opposed to an ardent pro-EU campaigner or something? Where were you at politically before the vote?
I got involved in politics in 2015, which was the first election I could vote in, if I remember rightly, or first general election I could vote in, and I did vote in that election.
I know who you voted for as well.
I voted Tory. I voted Conservative. I voted for.
Let's just end this podcast now, I think.
I voted for old Kevin Foster and the Conservatives, and it unfortunately, had I known what I know now, I perhaps might not have made that let's call it mistake and voted that way. But I did vote for Kevin Foster and the Conservatives. But that was my first real sort of entry into politics was around about that time, and it was just off the back of seeing so much, and I think it was mostly to do with social media, but so much politics online that I had never seen before, and I think that drew me in.
So you were getting political in 2015. Go through back to, or move forward now to 2016. So the European debate was happening. There were live debates on television. Nick Clegg, Nigel Farage were debating. I remember I was living in Exeter at the time, and I went to see Dan Hannan, the Tory Eurosceptic, absolute melon, talk Exeter University. And he gave a very polished speech. And I remember coming away thinking, well, that's made my mind up now. I'm definitely voting Remain. And the reason for that was I was told before I went to that event, this man, he's been fighting for Brexit for decades. He knows his arguments. He knows his stuff. This is the man who will persuade you to vote Leave. And I went in thinking fairly open-mindedly because I didn't really know which way I was going to vote at that stage. Okay, if Dan Hannan can sell me, then I'm sold. If he can't, then I'm probably going to vote the other way. And I came away with a really empty feeling. Basically, it was polished, it was rehearsed, but it was just empty. It was, we maybe could do this, or we could maybe do that, or there's options here and options. I just thought, you've had 30 years to develop a manifesto here, to develop a destination, not just these empty slogans. And anyway, so I came away from that moment. I think for me, that was when I felt I'm now going to vote Remain. Was there a moment for you where you were like, I'm going to vote Remain?
I remember having lengthy discussions in the stock room with my colleagues at Next, where I was working at the time, about Brexit. And I don't remember really knowing what I was talking about. I know talking about it a lot. And it was a discussion with a Lithuanian woman who was the only foreign worker at the time who thought actually we should leave the EU, and it was the Brits in the room, in the stock room, who weren't really voicing much support for leave, and I felt a little bit confused by that. It just seemed a bit odd that somebody from a European country working here would want us to leave, and thought that was a good idea. And then it was the night of the referendum, and I come home from work quite late. I think I was working a late shift. And I remember walking in the house and having a discussion with mum, I think, about where I was going to vote. And I remember not really being 100% sure how I was going to vote.
Wait, did you say discussion?
It wasn't really a discussion. It never, not that.
You weren't just screaming insults at each other for an hour.
No, it wasn't. They weren't really debates. They were more irate lectures.
Yeah, that sounds great. Like maybe there was such a thing as discussion pre 2016. I don't know. I can't remember that far back.
No, it was a loud discussion.
It was loud. Yeah, those are the best ones, I think.
I remember having a discussion, and I think we both sort of said we don't really know what to vote for. I think we both agreed that. And I remember having that discussion, but it was that evening that I watched a recap or something. I can't remember whether or not it was Nigel Farage or somebody on the news that evening. And then something didn't seem right about it. Something seemed odd. It just seemed very confrontational. It seemed very negative. And so that evening, the night before I went out to vote, I sat and researched as much as I could, and stayed up till quite late in the morning watching YouTube videos from the Leave side, and then going away and doing that thing that my brain does where it's like, right, what's the other side to this? And then going and having a look and being like, okay. And
you left your homework until the last minute, basically.
I did, and to be fair, that's done all right up until this point. It's done all right. It's not been perfect, but it's done all right.
Fair enough. Okay, let me ask mum and dad, same question, sort of thing. Like, were you, I remember having a chat with you, mum, about it. I think you came to Exeter. We were having brunch or something in a restaurant. So I remember chatting to you about it. At the time, I think I felt as though I'd done a little bit more research than you'd done at that stage. And I remember throwing some stuff at you, and you had some views. But did you feel back in 2016, before the vote, that you understood what the EU was, understood the options remain versus leave, and the sort of cost benefit? And that had you done your homework at the last minute like Jack, or were you just going into it with sort of a feeling as opposed to a solid sort of policy view?
Well, I didn't do any research. I think my mind was just made up that we needed to leave because the country would be better off. We bought into that. We bought into what we were told.
I think for us, it was more of like an emotional feel because of how we were brought up and the stories we were told and how great Britain was. Our emotional feeling was trying to be loyal to our parents and our grandparents because of the stories they told us, and now they had probably struggled with through the Second World War, as in grandparents, and we had this emotional loyalty to them to keep Britain British, rather than look at the actual facts that when we started looking at them, I couldn't find a way of arguing with the facts. Every time I looked at it and thought, well, this is what I believe, but when I actually look at the facts, it doesn't stack up. There's something wrong here, so I have to start listening more than just doing the emotional side.
The problem is that we did all that and learnt all that after we'd voted.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the problem. We learned what we should have done after we'd voted.
Yes.
Okay.
Not before we voted.
So it's worth noting that you've sort of since then you've sort of come 180 degrees, and now what would you say that you're pro EU now, or at least you would vote Remain now? Where would you say you are now?
Definitely vote Remain now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. So if you could go back in time, would you have done more research? Do you feel like your attitude at that time was maybe just, I don't know, like certainly Jack and I mean, certainly me at least, I didn't know what the EU was, couldn't tell you who the the commissioner was, couldn't tell you anything really about the EU. Not really. I mean, I'd done a little bit only because I just wanted to have that discussion in the workplace and I needed to just know a little bit. But I did the same as you guys. Jack and I are the same. I think we were all as ignorant as each other, Remain and Leave, pretty much.
Yeah.
And for me, the thing that gave that away was literally the day after the vote. The most Googled thing in the UK was, what is the European Union? And I'm sure that was, I don't know how many was Leave and Remain Googling that, but I also, I remember I asked a colleague of mine who'd done politics at university, had a politics degree. I thought I'll ask her because she'll have something intelligent to say about this. And I said, which way are you voting? And she said, she's my age. She said, I'm voting Remain. I said, okay, cool. Why? Because I like going traveling in Europe, and I like and I went interrailing, and I want to go interrailing again. I thought, is that really the strongest reason to vote Remain? Like, and that kind of, and then I was like, oh, I don't know if Remain is the right thing now, because that just seems like such a lame reason. It's such a big change for the UK. Like, but that's that felt like the level of the debate at that stage. I didn't have very many in-depth conversations with people. Certainly I did afterwards, but at that stage, it felt like we were all arguing more emotionally from a position of emotion than. And I've had a lot of conversations with people since who have sort of said, "Come on, are you going to say something?"
I don't think that we ever felt European.
Okay.
It didn't. Being European didn't have any impact on our lives, on mine and your dad's. But I think what we forgot is that our children felt or were European, because that's all they'd ever known. They'd been able to travel abroad whenever they wanted, just hop on a plane and fly to wherever they wanted in the world, in Europe. That had always been there for them. And I think we forgot your generation are European, but we didn't feel that. And I think we've taken that away from you.
I mean, it's nice that you're honest in that respect. I'm not sure, Jack. Did you feel European before the vote? Did you have a sense like your identity? I mean, for example, let's just take a Rangers Glasgow, Rangers Celtic. In Glasgow, you've got on a Monday you might be a Rangers fan. On a Tuesday you might be a Glaswegian. On a Wednesday you might be a Scot. On a Thursday you might be British, and on a Friday you might be European. So we all have multiple identities at all times, don't we? But did you ever feel that European identity was a big part of you back prior to 2016?
I don't think I ever thought about it. I mean, what would be the purpose of thinking I'm European? I mean, we are part of Europe geographically. We're intrinsically linked through the European Union, not just through the European Union, but through a multitude of different, international bodies that help to cooperate and coordinate, aid and all sorts of things around the world. You just assume that you're part of that group, don't you? And I don't think I ever looked at it and thought, oh, I'm inherently European, but I mean, I am. I was born a European citizen.
So you feel that way now? I mean, so this is the thing for me is I feel as though I've discovered a part of my identity that I didn't know existed, but only after it felt as though that part of me, which I didn't know was there necessarily, had been taken away from me forcibly by people who perhaps don't share my values. And that's really irked me since. And that's why I've been quite defiant about it is, oh, actually, I am European. And I do have very similar views to people in France and Germany and Denmark and Sweden. Perhaps I don't have the same views necessarily, all the same views and values as people in other parts of the world. So I feel like since the vote, I've become more aware of that part of my identity. I don't know. I mean, you and I have discussed this in the past, and I remember you saying something similar.
I feel the same. I definitely feel the same. I've discovered a love for Europe that I didn't know existed, and I'm not ashamed to say I've never actually left the borders of my own country. So I've never travelled abroad, and yet I still I still feel that connection to Europe that other people don't feel. We might have traveled and gone on holiday and experienced all the different cultures and experiences in different countries. And I haven't done that. And when I've had conversations with campaigners, colleagues, friends, family, and I say I've never left the country, and they're like, but you're anti-Brexit. It was almost like a wait, why sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, you voted for Kevin Foster, so I feel like you deserve a decade of being stuck in rainy Devon for at least a decade. No, okay. So that's a really interesting discussion. Identity, why we voted the way we did, and how we've developed sort of since. That's a conversation that we could take up the full hour. But I'm going to move on because we've got a lot to go through. So I want to now go to the morning after the vote. You and I, Jack, we both wrote quite lengthy statuses independently of one another, but we clearly had a similar emotional response the day after. So tell me about the day after the vote. What were you feeling? Where were you?
I think the initial feeling was shock. I was shocked that it had happened, because I feel like the general feeling, the general consensus was Remain was going to win by most of the country, to be honest.
Yeah, it was.
And I think I felt the same way. And despite going out and voting Remain, but also kind of still sort of the day before kind of being on the fence, I sort of was I was shocked, but a little bit like, I mean, if I voted Remain but could have voted either way a couple of days before, it's kind of not a shock really when so many people perhaps were in the same boat or didn't really know what was going on. So I was shocked, and I did take to social media where the discussions were lengthy and they were sizable, and there were a lot of people online who had become political analysts overnight, and there seemed to be, I think I made
economists, trade experts,
yeah, everybody.
Amazing. It was like have you ever seen Space Jam?
No.
You've not seen the film Space Jam, Bugs Bunny? Or in that, they all of their talent gets sucked into the basketball and then transported to these aliens. I felt it was a bit like that. Like all of a sudden, the population had just sort of sucked all of the expertise from the world's economists and trade experts, and just on that one specific thing. It was amazing. All of a sudden, there were so many experts. You could just find them on social media. You couldn't move for experts on pretty much.
Facebook it become.
Yeah, it was. No, but go on.
It was it was interesting to see how many people had an opinion on it after the vote had happened, because prior to the vote, I don't remember seeing many people speaking about it, posting videos, making comments. Right?
I mean, I've often used the word Dunning-Kruger to talk about people who have extreme confidence in their views, but virtually no expertise in their views. And that if you know anything about the Dunning-Kruger curve, you get less confident as you learn more, because you understand how much more there is to learn and blah, blah, blah. But do you think that's been a big issue with this, is that people were very defiant about their position, but also they weren't prepared to sort of like, a bit like what Mum and Dad just said a minute ago. They took a little while to be a bit more maybe like intellectually humble about perhaps their knowledge on the subject. And you and I think likewise. I think we started out thinking we knew more, and then it took a tumble and we felt, oh, actually, we've got a lot to learn here before we can really talk elegantly and smartly on this. But do you think that's an issue?
Yeah, I think so. And if I was to have the same discussions in that next stock room today, I would have listened. I'd have told that Jack of that stock room to listen more, and to understand a bit more, and also maybe to talk less, because often, if you don't understand so much and you think you understand, loads, then you probably don't.
I'm going to hold you to that. Talk less.
Yeah, me too.
Right. Let's move on again. So 48 and beyond. Tell me about that. So I know that the day after the vote, that was basically, this is where you and I, our sort of political trajectories are slightly different. You were pretty much dragged into pro-EU campaigning from the get-go, from the day after.
Yeah, I did the usual Jack thing of going head first and just taking on a project without thinking through it properly. And the day after the referendum happened, I remember going through that stage of shock, and then there was an element of me that was like, oh, well, surely we can do something about this, because it's definitely not going to go well, this. And I remember I think the thing that hit me was the pound dropped enormously to like record lows. I remember looking at it being like, oh, what have we done? I'm thinking, surely we can do something. And I got added to a Facebook group called the 48%. It was the first political group that I'd ever been added to on Facebook. I'm sure there were lots before, but
apart from the Kevin Foster fan group, probably.
Yeah, which I'd founded.
Yes.
And
you still got all those T-shirts?
Yeah, I've got loads. I've got bags of them in the loft. I remember thinking, okay, I've been added to this group. It was a family friend, I think, that added me to the group at the time. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. I don't really know what we're looking at. And the membership of the group grew from 0 to something like 10,000 in about 4 days. And I remember being like, oh, okay, maybe there's like a yearning for some kind of action here. Maybe people are looking to participate in something, community, build something, try to fight back against what's clearly a terrible decision. And so I got added to the group, and after a couple of days, as I saw the group growing really well, I thought, well, hey, I've had some success on social media doing bits here and there. Maybe I can help them out with a Facebook page, a public page. And so I approached the admins of the group at the time and said, look, I think we could use this group to grow an internal membership and then have an associated public page that could put out information, updates to the community, news, articles, rebuttals, and share that publicly, where you'll get to a much wider audience than you would just in a group where if you've got 10,000 people, you're only going to reach 10,000 people, whereas on a Facebook page you might have 1,000 likes, but you might reach 100,000 people.
Okay. So, at this stage, did you have any experience in campaigning or in sort of digital marketing or anything like that, or were you literally just passionate and knew how to run a Facebook page?
That's exactly it. I have no experience.
Okay, cool. So you were emotional. You were, I don't know, feeling maybe slightly defiant, perhaps motivated, and you wanted to get stuck into pro-EU campaigning after the referendum, as a lot of people who ended up becoming pro-EU campaigners, I think, did. So fast forward a little bit more then. So you've been helping grow the 48% group, the 48 and Beyond Facebook page. You and I, we started having conversations about pro-EU campaigning, and I had also been quite angry about it and wanted to do something about it. At the time, I think I'd been helping the Lib Dems in Exeter a little bit, and although I was keen to do more campaigning with the Lib Dems in Exeter, I just couldn't scratch that itch to do more on the EU front, and that basically just overwhelmed me in the end. And so you and I ended up founding Inspire EU, didn't we? Talk me through that a little bit. So why did you start a website, I think, and maybe set up a Facebook page or something, and then you and I had a discussion about what it was, what the purpose of it was, and we sort of grew it from there, didn't we? But why did you feel you needed to set your own thing up? What was you thinking there?
There are politics is politics, and there are a number of issues when it comes to campaigning, cooperation. And I remember feeling like I wanted to do so much more, and I had ambitions for the group to achieve more, for the page to achieve more. I remember during the campaigning that I was doing with the 48 and Beyond, I travelled up to London, organised a film crew, and we went up and did interviews with Professor Grayling, who got on your podcast next week, and also with Alistair Campbell. And we wanted to do those videos so that we could say, hey, you know, these big names support our group as well. We want you to back us. We're going to go out and do these great things and you know, push our politicians and get real change and hopefully stop Brexit. Because that for me, from I think day one, was probably the idea was, can we stop it?
That's interesting. So I have a slightly different memory of us when we first started talking about what Inspire You was going to become. Talking about at that stage, the ambition was to just challenge. I remember this phrase: challenge the inevitability of Brexit. So
well, I think that is the same thing. It's just, you know, what we didn't want to say to people, stop Brexit, because that's harsh, that's hard, and you know, you're trying to win people around. You're never going to win people around by saying let's stop Brexit, because that emotion.
No, I wouldn't don't tell that to the Lib Dems of 2019.
Well,
literally their slogan.
Exactly, and that went well. But the point is, you know, you're not going to win everybody around by being harsh on messaging. And so our view, it was always, you know, actually what we want to do is have a discussion with people instead of having an argument. And so it was always, let's challenge the inevitability of Brexit. And while we do that, we can learn something from you. We can all learn together about what it is, and then hopefully come to a better decision.
So you basically, you were from what I've understood, you were slightly growing infuriated with infuriated might not be the right word, but with maybe the pace and the direction of what was going on with 48 and Beyond. And you wanted to you're a bit more ambitious, and perhaps you wanted a bit more of your own creative license to do a bit more autonomy creatively.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously, like, you know, there's backroom politics, and there were discussions about what could be posted on the group and what could be shared on the page. And it got to the point where I was just like, you're never going to get to anybody by being like this. In fact, what was happening for a lot of the time, and I think a lot of the groups at the time, because everyone was so inexperienced, was everyone was piling red tape on campaigning, when what we actually needed to do was give people that creative license, that freedom to go off and reach people and do things that would enable us eventually to go out and reach people and change minds. And you can't do that by adding red tape to things.
Yeah, I agree. Was someone speaking there? Sorry.
It was me, James.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. And I think also in the beginning, I think you were angry at people that had voted leave. And I remember being a lot in the social media at the time, which has sort of changed over the years. But everybody was branded a racist that had voted to leave.
Yeah, but you are racist.
Rubbish.
Yeah, only to me.
Yeah, definitely.
No, you're right. Go on, sorry.
I think we were sort of all tarred with the same brush. And I think so. Then immediately, then if you voted leave, you became defensive. And I think that happened in the beginning, and we had that between the four of us.
Were you ever called racist or anything like that?
No, not
your face.
Not personally to me.
No.
And that's what you felt when you saw it on social media. I mean, I didn't even admit that I'd voted leave.
Oh, quite right.
Well,
imagine the abuse I'd have given you on social media.
Mate, you've ever Kevin Foster, you can pipe down.
Oh,
yeah, you're lucky I didn't throw you out after you told me you'd voted for him.
I didn't even know you'd voted for him.
Yeah, I kept that quiet from you.
Yeah.
But so I think that happened in the beginning with social media. Yeah. And then I think it sort of moved away from that, from calling people that had voted leave names. Yeah. The name calling, it did seem to change slightly. Obviously, me and Dad had you two boys who talked to us constantly. We talked about it after we'd all calmed down, you know, from the vote, from the result. And so then we started to listen.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. It did change.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people that I think voted leave feel like us, that they wish they hadn't.
Well, it's a great point, and I remember listening to an analysis of why Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, obviously slightly after the Brexit vote, and she referred to people who were going to vote for Donald Trump as a basket of deplorables. Obviously, what she meant was the kind of fringe MAGA nuts who are literally deplorable. I mean, there's no getting away from that, but it's far too easy for it, and it became far too easy. It was the same in this country, in my opinion, for UKIP types, particularly among the elites like Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks and people like that, to say, oh, look, they're calling us deplorables. David Cameron called UKIPers fruitcakes, loonies, and closet racists. He was not wrong. The people who were attracted to UKIP prior to 2016 were on the fringes of our politics for a reason, because they're hateful people, a lot of them, many of them. And I've met many of them, and they tick the boxes. You put a couple of drinks into them, they are not nice people. They are horrible people, a lot of them. Not all of them, of course. But it became very easy for MAGA nuts and UKIPers to just say, oh, look, they're calling all Leavers or all Republicans racists and deplorables and fruitcakes, when clearly what people like Hillary Clinton and David Cameron were referring to were the Nigel Farages and the Donald Trumps, really, and their very small, hateful clique. But I just think that the Remain groups and the Clintons at that time were just not good enough at communicating the fact that the mainstream, the political mainstream, was united in our values and as people, we're decent people, the vast majority of us, and didn't articulate at that stage the proponents, that the loudest proponents of Brexit, even now, were the radical fringe of the far right of the Conservative Party and UKIPers. David Cameron was a moderate conservative. Even Jeremy Corbyn, he campaigned for Remain, in inverted commas. The whole political spectrum, from the SNP, Plaid, Lib Dems, Greens, all were Remain. So it was this tiny clique. But in the media, because they wanted 50-50 a lot of the time, it felt like they actually represented 50% of the country. And really, they probably didn't. They only represented like 5%, if that sort of thing, maybe 1%. So that's been a massive issue, I think, is just this sense that a lot of the Leave people who did not fall into that kind of radical fringe UKIP group sort of felt as though they were being pushed into that group by really poor comms on the part of maybe Remain campaigners and in the US, the Clinton campaign. But it's a very good point, and I actually think there's still a lot of that today. Still, people feel maligned, even if they're not necessarily being maligned, but they just feel it, and it's hard to really overcome that. I don't know how we overcome that. Maybe, like you said, maybe just by listening more. I don't know, but it's a good point. Jack, let's move on to. We've set Inspire You up. What we set up a couple of student groups as well. We set up Extra Students for Europe, and you set up what was your group called?
LSBU Students for Europe.
Yeah, LSBU Students. So we had back in, when was this? 2018, wasn't it? I think.
We've kind of missed an important point here, where in 2017 I actually moved to London.
Oh, okay. Sorry for the Jack Dart narrative. This is really important. Okay, so you've moved to London. You've become a metropolitan liberal elite, an absolute bore. Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah.
Hang on. He left home. All right.
I did. I left home.
Finally left home. Yeah.
Yeah. I moved into a posh flat in Canary Wharf. I started drinking port on the weekends and going shooting with my friends. No, I'm joking. I moved to London.
Nothing wrong with drinking port on the weekends. Carry on.
In 2017, end of 2017, September 2017, I moved to London to study law, and this is actually kind of part and parcel of the whole getting into politics thing. And what I wanted to do was, I've always had an ambition to go to university. I always felt like I could do it. And I always wanted to do it, but I didn't know whether or not I'd ever be able to do it, because school had never worked out for me in the past. And so it was one of those things where when the opportunity came up, I thought, right, I've got to go. And so I did. And I got there and I started doing a law degree. And that was part of my learning about the European Union and learning more about politics. And in my first year, I did European politics, and I did public law, and that all helped me understand the functions of the European Union and the way that we are intrinsically linked with them, and the way that our law works. And so it gave me a better understanding of, you know, how that all works, and it was really, really useful to me to do that. I thought I kind of needed to add that in there, otherwise we're just suddenly in a different place.
I know. Well, the I deferred my law degree to fight Brexit bumper stickers that you have. That would, we definitely need the context for that, for sure. Okay, so no, but thanks for adding that in. No, of course, yeah. So you went off to uni. You were living in London, and weren't you one of the first people to go down to the Sodom protest outside Parliament with Steve Bray?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was organized, I think, initially through the groups that we were all part of on Facebook. And I can't remember whether or not it was never called Sodom to start off with. It was something, and it had been promoted through one of the Facebook groups that we were in. And I remember looking at it and thinking, well, hey, I'm in London. Why don't I go down? And I remember going down. Well, Steve Bray would go down at stupid o'clock in the morning, sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning, would be there, and he'd stay there until I think 5 or 5:30 at night. And he was there every day that Parliament sat. So he wasn't there at the weekends. And so when I wasn't at uni, or when I could skive off uni, or when I, you know, had finished uni, I would...
When you weren't shooting or had a port hangover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'd take the carcass system the night before, and I'd go down to Sodom and stand with Steve. And there are
Sounds very biblical.
It is positively biblical. And I
remember seeing a good photo of you, literally blistering, like horizontal snow, and you and Steve Bray outside Parliament. You looked like complete weirdos at the time. I remember thinking, why are they shouting at a building? the EU.
It was an interesting concept, the whole megaphone at Parliament. But what reason it was there and it was so effective is it was right next to Parliament's media village on College Green, and it was so effective. You know, being that close to Parliament, all the MPs would walk down outside of Parliament and along to go to Millbank, to all of the TV studios around there. And so being there actually gave you kind of first class access, if you like, a golden ticket to talk to MPs, MEPs.
Talk to or harass?
Harass and harangue. I mean, I hunted down Tim Farron outside and got him on a live stream just before he was running in to go and vote on something, I think. So it was,
But you were one of the original people down there, basically, with Steve.
I was down there early. I remember being down there in the snow. Yeah.
No, to be fair to Steve and to the Sodom campaigning, obviously I ended up jumping on the bandwagon, coming down and protesting down there as well. And you're right, it became a proper like proxy battleground, didn't it? Because the evolution of like forests and the canopy and stuff, where you've got trees, excuse me, fighting for light. And it felt like that with the flags, like Remainers trying to get their flag slightly higher or slightly more in view of the camera. And it was like a proper like jungle canopy. Like every day the flags would get slightly bigger, and they were but it was, on the whole, it felt like a really tight community, a passionate community. And I remember when I was there, I got a real sense of these are people who, and this podcast is called Remoaner Telling Our Story. And I use the word Remoaner deliberately because for me, a Remoaner is just somebody who looked at Brexit and thought, this is going to seriously damage and diminish our country, and I don't want that as a future. And henceforth, I'm going to fight this and campaign against this. And for me, that's what Remoaner was. It's not a negative thing to moan about the fact that we're pursuing a course of action that's going to damage and diminish our country. And that place, Sodom, was full of Remoaners, but they were brilliant people. Many of them were top professionals. Many of them were retired people, passionate people, people that had fought Thatcher's government or you know, they were just a lot of politicos and a lot of people that had never been political before in their life. So a complete mixed bag, but people who were united in their love for their country and wanted to stop what they thought and what you and I thought was just a uniquely and unprecedented, ridiculous policy decision.
There were also, and I think it's worth mentioning as well, so many Europeans who had spent their life in this country, moved here when they were in their teens, brought up children here, married here. So many that were down there that I'd had discussions with who were just, they felt afraid, shocked, dismayed. They didn't know what would happen to them. And I remember having a discussion with I can't remember whether or not she was Polish. And I'm sure she can, if she watches this, she can message me. But we remember having that discussion down there, and I remember her crying in front of me and saying, I just don't know what's going to happen to me, and I have children here, and I don't, I'm so afraid. And that really made you want to be there. Do you know what I mean? It made you want to help those people.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, that the fact that we just, as a country, we just stopped listening to each other. There was so many heartbroken people whose lives were just thrown into complete turmoil, and particularly the Europeans who were living here, the 3 million. And that the In Limbo book, the first one, I remember flicking through that and just feeling so angry and so depressed and demoralized, at times, flicking through that and just thinking, what has our country done? What have we become? We've become nasty. We've become heartless, dispassionate. And all for what? Like, if we were getting something fantastic at the end of it, then maybe you say, oh, these people collateral damage. That's sad, but we're getting this panacea at the end. There was nothing ever. So it just rubbed salt into the wounds that there were people out there who were having to make plans to leave, whose lives were they were just stressed, anxious, crying. Like, what sort of country does that to people who are living here, who are contributing here? Like, it felt like we had become the embodiment of the ERG as a country, like the nasty people in the old nasty party, the old Thatcherites, the nasty party, the milk snatcher, those types, taken over the narrative, taken over parliament, they've taken over everything, the media, and that just oozed out of them and just through society. And it just felt like we were living through a really nasty period. And we are where we are. And that's kind of why it feels really bitter now. And people say, you lost, get over it. And you just think, we've all lost. Our society is diminished as a result of this. We've all lost. But anyway, I don't want to look too much back and lament too much of it. So let's move forward again. I want to talk to you about a bit more about Inspire You, but particularly I want to talk to you about what you think were our campaign successes and failures, but also the wider pro-EU movement, and the wider successes and failures of the campaign. So let's start with Inspire You. We set it up. We've got some student groups. We set those groups up as well. What we were trying to do from memory back then was fight the inevitability of Brexit, but also we wanted to inspire and we wanted to reach young people. We were a youth group. We wanted to reach young people. I have a question for you, because I have my own views on this. I don't think you and I have actually spoken about this properly, but do you feel now, looking back, that we did a good enough job at reaching young people?
My answer is no. I think we could have done a lot more to reach young people. Young people, I think, are the most important group to reach, because they are a significant portion of the electorate, and they are the most significant portion that don't vote. And so it's crucial, if you can get the young people engaged, get them out and get them voting, it's important you do that, because you can switch entire elections. You could switch an entire election. You could change the entire outcome of a country just on young people alone. And for me, I don't feel like we did enough. And I knew at the time that we understood that, but I don't feel like we had the campaigning experience, at least at that point, to be able to properly engage.
So, Jack, tell me, Yes, I Will Vote was set up in 2019. You and I set that up. For the listeners, talk us through what that was, why we set it up, and what were the campaign objectives and whether you felt they were met.
So, Yes, Our Vote was born out of the same idea that Inspire You always had, the goals, the vision of Inspire You, which was to reach young people and engage them. And that was always the focus of Inspire You. And we did, I remember, organize events at the universities using Inspire You through the student societies we set up on campus, and had speakers come. And something we learned at the time was that the way that you get to, I mean, the event should have been highly turned out. We had Vince Cable, Michael Duggan, AC Grayling. They should have been packed amphitheatres, but what we actually had was, half a room full of students, and that's not good enough. We had the leader of the Lib Dems on my university campus and had half a room, and that just didn't seem right to me. I was thinking, no way that you can have the leader of the Lib Dems at your campus and only half the room full. And I remember it was not a majority of young people in the room either. It was actually people that we'd used through social media, through our campaigning on the Facebook pages and in the groups, to get people outside the uni there. And that was something that hit me at the time, was the power of social media in political campaigning. That was a big thing I realized. And also trying to get students at university campuses to engage in this issue didn't seem like the right way to go about it. And we gave it a go, and I think we did an okay job, but realistically we had to go down another route, and we'd had an idea for a while, and I think we'd spoken about it at length before we put any plans together, trying to make sure that if a general election came up, which was always on the table. I remember talking about it in 2018. It was always on the cards, a general election now, is it a general election? Are we going to get one in October? Are we going to get one in March? When's it going to happen? There was always this, okay, we need to be prepared. We're going to have a plan in place. And part of the vision of Inspire You was creating a campaign that could go out, engage with young people, and get them out registered and voted. And that was what Yes Our Vote was. It was a campaign to do exactly that. And I think we did a good job. I think actually the Yes Our Vote campaign was a huge success when you look at what we actually did. And with the budget that we had, and the limited campaigning resources and our limited campaigning experience, I think actually the Yes Our Vote campaign, for me, and winning the council election was a significant life event for me, but I would rank the Yes Our Vote campaign higher than my election win.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it felt as though the Yes I'll Vote campaign was our biggest success in campaigning up until that point. We obviously had a lot of help from people like Mike Goldsworthy and Best of Britain, who gave us advice and helped us find some funds and stuff. But it was largely just me and you, really, who were trying to do things that we hadn't really ever done before. And we were fortunate enough that we managed to find sort of almost without looking, a really good team of people who had lots of skills that we needed in that team, who were prepared to do everything for us pretty much for free because they were passionate about the future of the country. So we were fortunate in that sense. But Yes I'll Vote obviously did its job. I think I remember we signed up something like 11% of the people who went through to the government website came via the Yes I'll Vote, our campaigning. So of young people. So we although Inspire You, go on.
The thing is it's so hard to know because we can't track anything that happens on the government website, and so for us, we could trace traffic, right? So we sort of became data analysts during this as well, and it was took a weird turn from campaigning on social media to sort of analyzing all of this data and trying to understand how it all works and becoming very technical overnight. And
it was learning on the job, really, wasn't it? A lot of it.
It was, and actually, had it not been for the team, like you say, that we had with all the technical support, you know, that campaign would never ever have worked, and it won't in the way that it did.
Yeah. So we Inspire You sort of morphed into Yes, I'll Vote. We got people to register to vote, and then we got them to turn out. But obviously, the 2019 general election didn't go the way that we wanted it to. Mum and Dad, I'm just wondering, go back to the 2019 general election. What were your thoughts and feelings leading up to that? Did you have a view which way you were going to vote? Did you have a view which way you felt Brexit would go if there was a certain vote? What were you? How were you feeling? You voted, both of you, didn't you, in 2019?
Yeah, we voted Lib Dem because you know, we live in an area where it's either Conservative or Lib Dem. So we voted Lib Dem. I think we were sort of maybe buoyed really by what you two were doing. That by that point, we actually felt that you could really make a difference. Yeah, so I think, you know, we were really feeling like you at the time. You know, we were on your side. We felt really, you know, hopeful. Yeah, we did. We felt like you know, at that point.
So were you hoping for? I guess I remember the options at that stage. Really, realistically, were a hung parliament and a minority Labour government was probably the best we were hoping for. And Jack and I were obviously asking people to vote tactically so that we could starve the Tories of a majority. Obviously, that didn't work. They got an 80-seat majority. But were you hoping that Brexit would get, Article 50 would get revoked? Were you hoping for a people's vote, another referendum? Were you just hoping that it would just all go away? I mean, what were you feeling in terms of Brexit? Did you want Brexit to stop? I mean,
well, I mean, at that point, obviously, we'd completely, you know, changed our minds.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we were Remainers, and that's what we wanted. That's the outcome that we wanted. I mean, if we'd have been able to at the time, we would have been up in London marching in those marches. You know, that's how we felt. We felt, oh, I did anyway. I felt quite passionate about it.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I saw you boys up there and everybody marching. And I hated that I couldn't be there doing that. I wanted to be up there doing that.
So would you say that you were inspired then by the campaigning efforts of the sort of pro-EU community? I don't know, like how basically it's interesting because I remember you and I had a conversation. I think Jack was there as well, like way back in, it might have been 2016, 2017. And I remember you saying, if Jack and I had the audacity to go and do a stall in Torquay for Remain, you would go and set up a Leave stall or a pro-Brexit stall on the other side of the road to us. So to go from that to...
That must have been your other mother.
But just, I'm interested about your journey a little bit. I think other people would be as well. But so how was it just gradual? I mean, was it something you didn't notice? I mean, what would you say it came down to?
You know, you Remainers used to call us Leave voters uneducated.
Did we?
And so you did. And so we didn't like that.
Not sure
but I think, I mean, you know, I haven't been to university and neither has your dad. And I think you sort of...
Oh, well, there we go then.
Well, you know.
Uneducated.
Okay, yeah. But I think you were right, but maybe not in the way that you meant it. But I think we all were uneducated. I don't think in 2016 anybody realised what we were doing, the impact it was going to have. We didn't know. And I don't think really anybody was really interested, or maybe not really that engaged. Everybody had views, but they had their own views. And some of these views they could have held for 20, 30, 40 years. mean, don't forget, we just had the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Daily Mirror, or in my neck of the woods anyway. Well, wasn't really in the, the Times neck of the woods. And,
you tell me, you didn't buy that. You never bought the Daily Express, did you?
Possibly if they didn't have the Mirror or the Mail, possibly.
Oh, Mum, that is shocking. Okay. Wow.
So
We might have to
remember is that's where
edit
we
that.
used to get our information from.
We
I
did.
mean, like with me at work, every man bought a newspaper every morning. And the point with a lot of that is you needed very easy reading when you're at work because you have a limited time to sit and digest it.
Yeah.
You're not going to sit there for hours reading the paper. So it's stuff that you can just read the headlines and very little more and then move on because you've got to get back to work. So that was where we used to get our information, not like the internet and the stuff you can get now. We used to just read the daily papers.
Yeah.
And everybody where I worked, everybody brought a paper and they would read 10 minutes at tea break and 25 minutes at dinner break. And that's so we didn't have the internet. So our information all came from that. So when we look at
and we believed everything we read.
That was the other thing.
We didn't question. We didn't really question it.
We always thought what was written was true.
We did.
Right.
And so we held these sort of views in our heads, and really they were turned upside down after 2016, when actually then we started to research and read and listen to people and things that we'd never done prior to that. And we became more political. I feel more political now.
Yeah.
If I was 30 years younger, I think I would be doing a lot more politically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense. I remember, Dad, I always used to enjoy buying the Sun with you when we went on the building site because the Sun had the most creative lies about who Man United were buying in the transfer window. It was literally, I remember it was always like Man United are signing Michael Ballack, Man United are signing Schneider, re-signing Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously, we never did, but
it wasn't page 3 then.
No. It wasn't page 3. No, I mean that's probably the other reason why the builders bought the Sun, probably. But,
exactly. Yeah.
No, I mean that you make a very good point, and that's the thing as well. Like with both the Brexit vote and also with Donald Trump in America, the education as well as age and also socioeconomic background, they were the 3 main cleavages in the Brexit vote. And I think it's been really hard for educated people to try to engage with people who are using arguments that they've just heard from the Daily Mail, just a headline, something. I found that really, because I've always been very sensitive around not wanting to insult people or imply that they're poorly educated or something. But it's at the same time, if you've just spent half an hour typing out, a 500-word response to somebody on Facebook, and then they just come back with basically, the top hits of Daily Mail headlines or something, just poorly, very poorly worded, loads of spelling mistakes. You just think, do I have the energy to engage? I don't know how necessarily to engage these people because they just seem so defiant and defensive and in the trenches. And they're not really, it doesn't seem like they're here for an open-minded debate or discussion. It just seems like they're here to sling mud. And maybe that was true of the Remain group as well. I'm sure it was. But Brexit's always felt like that there is an educational divide there, and both sides are struggling really to engage with the other.
It is interesting though that more young people now more than ever are going to university, especially than they did in our time, but yet they're still not politically engaged. They're still not getting politically engaged. Are they?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the majority of the sort of climate change campaigners, that's a very youthful group, and then you have all on the Friday marches and stuff. But actually, you bring up a very good point, and this is something that Jack and I discussed a lot about our own campaigning. Was why were all the pro-EU marches, all the pro-EU campaign stunts, and all the rest of it? why were there so many older people there? And this was the thing, Jack and I. It's certainly true that young people were more pro-EU as a percentage of their age. However, the vast majority of the activists in the pro-EU campaign were older people, and it was a sea, excuse me, it was a sea of grey hair really on these marches. Obviously, there were some younger people, and occasionally they'd be sort of shunted to the front of the march to make it look like there was a big group of young people for campaigning reasons. That was done, obviously, but the truth is. It was very, very difficult to get young people who were naturally pro-EU to actually move from just being a supporter of the European Union to an activist and want to fight Brexit. That became very difficult. And all over the world, in virtually any campaign you can think of, young people are usually the least represented because they haven't got things on the line. They haven't got houses on the line. They haven't got schools to think about for their kids. So they've just got less reason to be political.
And I
so
think also, the youth haven't lived through experiences of recessions and boom time and recessions and stuff like that. So they haven't got that experience of thinking, well, if we don't try to do something to help this cause, we could be back in a recession or things like that. And so the older people, because they've lived through that kind of experience, they know that they have to try and help where they can on that, to not get into a kind of experience where they're going to be struggling again.
Jack, tell me reasons to be cheerful in 2021.
Well, the good thing is we're in a much better place now than we have been before. We're much more prepared. We have some semblance of a plan, an idea, a route forward. And luckily, the EU has been good to us. They keep saying we've left a light on. There are lots of posts from our EU counterparts saying there's a route back. And I think we do have a good idea of where we might be, in the next 12 months in terms of a rejoin campaign. And that's a positive thing because we're all still a little bit hurt. Well, a lot of us are still a lot hurt from the general election 2019. And we want to turn that around. We don't want to think that the future is this horrible, bleak COVID infested world forever. We want to be able to, turn all of that around, get a new leader in place and rejoin the EU. And there is definitely a way for us to do that. The Brexiters had 40 years to prepare their campaign, but they started with nothing. We're not starting from nothing. We're starting from a position where we've got arguably the strongest pro-EU core base anywhere in Europe. We're much more organized, much more connected. We're very cohesive, and we've all got good campaigning experience that we didn't have before. So for me, whilst I feel like I still feel hurt, I still feel emotional about it, I'm still upset about the general election, there is a lot to be optimistic about, and we can definitely fight back against this group of nutters, and we can definitely turn it around.
And will you be voting for Kevin Foster again, or has that ship sailed?
It depends if he stands next time. I could be persuaded to vote.
At least next time he'll be classed as a loco.
Oh, what does that mean?
Well, he's been down here long enough now to be a class as a loco.
Oh, I see. Yeah. The liberal metropolitan elite over there, London liberal metropolitan elite.
Yeah.
Gracing the Southwest with his presence. Yeah. Mum and Dad, same question. Reasons to be cheerful in 2021. Have you got any pearls of wisdom for us?
His sort of fairly non-political brothers managed to get himself a job in Europe, just as we got kicked out and become a resident.
That before we got kicked out, that's the important distinction.
Yeah, and he's now a resident, and so his parents are allowed to go and stay with him.
Oh, well, that's good for you. So basically, your advice is have a child, get them to move to Bulgaria, then you can go and visit them from time to time.
Before you leave the European Union.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we could become residents of Europe. I mean, so we're quids in. Or use our Irish grandparents, move to Ireland, or even Scotland.
You could campaign to leave the UK and rejoin the EU.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So,
So you don't really care about
or we could stay here and just be Little Englanders,
Well, yeah, exactly.
And that doesn't make me cheerful
No. Well, I mean, this is it. This is it's a hard question, isn't it? Reasons to be cheerful in 2021, because there is still a lot in the world that is very challenging for progressives, but just for everyone, obviously with COVID and stuff. If you were to have asked me this question, I would have said Joe Biden is something to hold on to. The fact that America, which is arguably a more balmy place than the UK, has managed to overcome Trumpism, MAGAism, and the populism and the bile and the disgusting anti-politics that comes of Trump. The fact that they've overcome that is potentially offers us a blueprint out of the mess that we're in. But for me, it's only going to get worse before it gets better. I still think that with Boris Johnson, because even if he leaves, it could happen this year. You've got the prospect of another ERG member filling his shoes. It's going to be very similar. They may not be as bumbling and as clown-like, but they're going to be as Machiavellian and dispassionate and chaotic. So until we remove the ERG from power, and I don't just mean in Parliament, I mean in the press, in the levers of power that they hold in places like the BBC and other institutions in the UK, it's going to be tricky. So long road ahead. But Jack, I think you're right. I think we've got a very strong base now that we didn't have in 2016 in order to rejoin. It could take a little while. And we'll hear from more guests on the show as we move forward to see what other people think our route to rejoining is. But for now, I want to just say thank you to both of you. This was a fun episode. I'm glad we did it.
Where's my thank you?
I said thank you to it. I was literally just about to thank both of you individually.
You said thank you to both of you. There's three of us.
To all of you. That was my bad. Yeah. Thank you. Well, to both groups.
Yeah.
To both screens. Okay. Thank you to Mum and Dad. Less thanks to Jack.
Come on.
All right. Here's hoping for a more positive 2021. So thank you both. Thank you all three.
All right. Thanks. Well, bye then.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to the first episode of the Remoaners Telling Our Story podcast series. If you like the first episode, you'll like what's coming next. Next week we have Professor AC Grayling, a man who needs no introduction. If you would like to support the channel, head over to the YouTube channel now, like and subscribe. And if you would like to watch the episodes in video format, you can become a patron and access all exclusive content on via the Patreon page. So please have a look at that too. All the links are in the description. I hope you enjoy, and I hope to see you again next week. Thank you very much.